and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Have Spacesuit Will Travel by Robert Heinlein. We left our hero and narrator Kip down a hole in an alien base on Pluto. The next thing tossed down the hole was Fats. Skinny landed on him seconds later. I backed off and held my dagger ready. Skinny ignored me, picked himself up, looked around, went to the water spout, and got a drink. Fats was in no shape to do anything. His breath was knocked out. I looked at him and thought what a nasty parcel he was. Then I thought, oh, what the deuce. He had massaged me when I needed it. I heaved him onto his stomach and began artificial respiration. In 4 or 5 pushes, his motor caught and he was able to breathe. He gasped, "That's enough." I backed off, got my knife out. Skinny was sitting against a wall, ignoring us. Fats looked at my feeble weapon and said, "Put that away, kid. We're bosom buddies now." "We are?" "Yeah, us human types had better stick together." He sighed wretchedly. "After all we done for him, that's gratitude." "What do you mean?" I demanded. "Huh?" said Fats. "Just what I said. He decided he could do without us. So Annie doesn't live here anymore." "Shut up," the skinny one said flatly. Fats screwed his face into a pout. "You shut up," he said peevishly. "I'm tired of that. It's shut up here and shut up there all day long, and look where we are." "Shut up," I said. Fats shut up. I never did find out what had happened because Fats seldom gave the same explanation twice. The older man never spoke except for that tiresome order to shut up, or in monosyllables even less helpful. But one thing was clear. They had lost their jobs as assistant gangsters or fifth columnists or whatever you call a human being who would stooge against his own race. Once Fats said, "Matter of fact, it's your fault." "Mine?" I dropped my hand to my tin can knife. "Yours. If you hadn't butted in, he wouldn't have got sore. I didn't do anything. Says you swiped his 2 best prizes, that's all, and held him up when he planned to hightail it back here." "Oh, but that wasn't your fault." "So I told him. You try telling him. Take your hand away from that silly nail file." Fats shrugged. "Like I always say, let bygones be bygones." I finally learned the thing I most wanted to know. About the fifth time I brought up the matter of Peewee, Fats said, "What do you want to know about the brat for?" "I just want to know whether she's alive or dead." "Oh, she's alive. Leastwise she was last time I seen her." "When was that?" "You ask too many questions. Right here." "She's here?" I said eagerly. "That's what I said, wasn't it? Around everywhere and always underfoot. Living like a princess, if you ask me." Fats picked his teeth and frowned. "Why he should make a pet out of her and treat us the way he did beats me. It ain't right." I didn't think so either, but for another reason. The idea that gallant little Peewee was the spoiled darling of Wormface I found impossible to believe. There was some explanation, or Fats was lying. "You mean he doesn't have her locked up?" "What's it get him? Where's she going to go?" I pondered that myself. Where could you go? When you step outdoors, that's suicide. Even if Pee-wee had her spacesuit, and that at least was probably locked up, even if a ship was at hand and empty when she got outside, even if she could get into it, she still wouldn't have a ship's brain, the little gadget that served as a lock. What happened to the mother thing? The what? The, I hesitated. Uh, the non-human who was in my spacesuit with me. You must know, you were there. Is she alive? Is she here? But Fats was brooding. "Them bugs don't interest me none," he said sourly, and I could get no more out of him. But Pee-wee was alive, and a hard lump in me was suddenly gone. She was here. Her chances, even as a prisoner, had been enormously better on the moon. Nevertheless, I felt almost ecstatic to know that she was near. I began thinking about ways to get a message to her. As for Fat's insinuation that she was playing footsie with Wormface, it bothered me not at all. Pee-wee was unpredictable and sometimes a brat and often exasperating, as well as conceited, supercilious, and downright childish. But she would be burned alive rather than turn traitor. Joan of Arc had not been made of sterner stuff. We three kept uneasy truce. I avoided them, slept with one eye open, and tried not to sleep unless they were asleep first. I always kept my dagger at hand. I did not bathe after they joined me. It would have put me at a disadvantage. The older one ignored me. Fats was almost friendly. He pretended not to be afraid of my puny weapon, but I think he was. The reason I think so comes from the first time we were fed. Three cans dropped from the ceiling. Skinny picked up one, Fats got one, but when I circled around to take the third, Fats snatched it. I said, "Give me that, please." Fats grinned. "What makes you think this is for you, sonny boy?" Three cans, three people. "So what? I'm feeling a mite hungry. I don't hardly think I can spare it." "I'm hungry too. Be reasonable." He seemed to consider it. "Tell you what, I'll sell it to you." I hesitated. It had a shifty logic. Wormface couldn't walk into Lunar Base Commissary and buy these rations. Probably Fats or his partner had bought them. I wouldn't mind signing IOUs, $100 a meal, 1,000, a million. Money no longer meant anything. Why not humor him? No. If I gave in, if I admitted I had to dicker with him for my prison rations, he would own me. I'd wait on him hand and foot, do anything he told me, just to eat. I let him see my tin dagger. "I'll fight you for it." Fats glanced at my hand and grinned broadly. "Can't you take a joke?" He tossed me the can. There was no trouble at feeding times after that. We lived like that happy family you sometimes see in a traveling zoo, a lion caged with a lamb. It is a startling exhibit, but the lamb has to be replaced frequently. Fats liked to talk, and I learned things from him when I could sort out truth from lies. His name, so he said, was Jacques de Bardevigny. "Call me Jock." And the older man was Timothy Johnson, but I had a hunch that their real names could be learned only by inspecting post office bulletin boards. Despite Jock's pretense of knowing everything, I soon decided that he knew nothing about Wormface's origin and little about his plans and purposes. Wormface did not seem the sort to discuss things with lower animals. He would simply make use of them as we use horses. Jock admitted one thing readily. "Yeah, we put the snatch on the brat. There's no uranium on the moon. Those stories are just to get suckers. We were wasting our time, and a man's got to eat, don't he?" I didn't make the obvious retort. I wanted information. Tim said, "Shut up." "Oh, what of it, Tim? You worried about the FBI? You think the man can put his arm on you here?" "Shut up," I said. "Happens I feel like talking, so blow it." Jock went on. "It was easy. The brat's got more curiosity than seven cats. He knew she was coming, and when—" Jock looked thoughtful. "He always knows. He's got lots of people working for him, some high up. All I had to do was be in Luna City and get acquainted. I made the contact because Tim here ain't the fatherly type the way I am. I got to talking with her. I buy her a Coke. I tell her about the romance of hunting uranium on the moon and similar hogwash. Then I sigh and say it's too bad I can't show her the mind of my partner and I. That's all it took. When the tourist party visited Tombaugh Station, she got away and sneaked out the lock. She worked out that part her own self. She's sly, that one. All we had to do was wait where I told her. I didn't even have to be rough with her until she got worried about taking longer for the crawler to get to our mine than I told her." Jock grinned. "She fights pretty well for her weight. Scratched me some." Poor little Peewee. Too bad she hadn't drawn and quartered him. But the story sounded true, for it was the way Peewee would behave, sure of herself, afraid of no one, unable to resist any educational experience. Jock went on. "It wasn't the brat he wanted. He wanted her old man. Had some swindle to get him to the moon. Didn't work." Jock grinned sourly. "That was a bad time. Things ain't good when he don't have his own way. But he had to settle for the brat. Tim here pointed out to him he could trade." Tim chucked in one word which I took as a general denial. Jock raised his eyebrows. "Listen to Vinegar Puss. Nice manners, ain't he?" Maybe I should have kept quiet since I was digging for facts, not philosophy, but I've got Peewee's failing myself. When I don't understand, I have an unbearable itch to know why. I didn't and don't understand what made Jock tick. Jock, why'd you do it? Huh? Look, you're a human being, at least he looked like one, and you pointed out we humans had better stick together. How could you bring yourself to kidnap a little girl and turn her over to him? Are you crazy, boy? I don't think so. You talk crazy. Have you ever tried not doing something he wanted? Try it sometime. I saw his point. Refusing Wormface would be like a rabbit spitting in a snake's eye, as I knew too well. Jock went on. You gotta understand the other man's viewpoint. Live and let live, I always say. We got grabbed while we were messing around looking for Cartonite, and after that, we never stood no chance. You can't fight City Hall, that gets you nowhere. So we made a dicker. We run his errands, he pays us in uranium. My faint sympathy vanished. I wanted to throw up. You got paid? Well, you might say we got time on the books. I looked around our cell. You made a bad deal. Jock grimaced, looking like a sulky baby. Maybe so, but be reasonable, kid. You gotta cooperate with the inevitable. These boys are moving in. They got what it takes. You seen that yourself. Well, a man's got to look out for number one, don't he? It's a cinch nobody else will. Now, I seen a case like this when I was no older than you, and it taught me a lesson. Our town had run quietly for years, but the big fellow was getting old and losing his grip. Whereupon some boys from St. Louis moved in. Things were confused for a while. The man had to know which way to jump, else he woke up wearing a wooden overcoat like as not. Those that seen the handwriting made out. Those that didn't, well, it don't do no good to buck the current, I always say. It makes sense, don't it? I could follow his logic, provided you accepted his live louse standard, but he had left out a key point. Even so, Jock, I don't see how you could do that to a little girl. Huh? I just explained how we couldn't help it. But you could. Even allowing how hard it is to face up to him and refuse orders, you had a perfect chance to duck out. What do you mean? He sent you to Luna City to find her. You said so. You've got a return fare benefit. I know you have. I know the rules. All you had to do was sit tight where he couldn't reach you and take the next ship back to Earth. You didn't have to do his dirty work. But I cut him off. Maybe you couldn't help yourself out in a lunar desert. Maybe you wouldn't feel safe even inside Tombaugh Station. But when he sent you into Luna City, you had your chance. You didn't have to steal a little girl and turn her over to a bug eyed monster. He looked baffled, then answered quickly, Kip, I like you. You're a good boy, but you ain't smart. You don't understand. I think I do. No, you don't. He leaned toward me, started to put a hand on my knee. I drew back. He went on, There's something I didn't tell you, for fear you'd think I was well, a zombie or something. They operated on us. Huh? They operated on us, he went on glibly. They planted bombs in our heads, remote control like a missile. A man gets out of line, he punches a button, bluey, brains all over the ceiling. He fumbled at the nape of his neck. See the scar? My hair's getting kind of long, but if you look close, I'm sure you'll see it. It can't have disappeared entirely. See it? I started to look. I might even have been sold on it. I'd been forced to believe less probable things lately. Tim cut short my suspended judgment with one explosive word. Jock flinched, then braced himself and said, Don't pay any attention to him. I shrugged and moved away. Jock didn't talk the rest of that day. That suited me. The next morning, I was roused by Jock's hand on my shoulder. Wake up, Kip, wake up! I groped for my toy weapon. It's over there by the wall, Jock said, but it ain't ever going to do you any good now. I grabbed it. What do you mean? Where's Tim? You didn't wake up? Huh? This is what I've been scared of. Cripes, boy, I just had to talk to somebody. You slept through it? Through what? And where's Tim? Jock was shivering and sweating. They blue lighted us, that's what. They took Tim. He shuddered. I'm glad it was him. I thought, well, maybe you've noticed I'm a little stout. They like fat. What do you mean? What have they done with him? Poor old Tim. He had his faults like anybody, but he's soup by now. That's what. He shuddered again. They like soup, bones and all. I don't believe it. You're trying to scare me. So? He looked me up and down. They'll probably take you next. Son, if you're smart, you take that letter opener of yours to that horse trough, open your veins. It's better that way. I said, Why don't you? Here, I'll lend it to you. He shook his head and shivered. I ain't that smart. I don't know what became of Tim. I don't know whether the worm faces ate people or not. You can't say cannibalism. We may be mutton to them. I wasn't especially scared because I have long since blown all the fuses in my scare circuits. What happens to my body after I'm through with it does not matter to me, but it did to Jock. He had a phobia about it. I don't think Jock was a coward. Cowards don't even try to become prospectors on the moon. He believed his theory, and it shook him. He halfway admitted that he had more reason to believe it than I had known. He had been on Pluto once before, so he said, and other men who had come along or been dragged on that trip had not come back. When feeding time came, 2 cans, he said he wasn't hungry and offered me his rations. That night, he sat up and kept himself awake. Finally, I just had to go to sleep before he did. I awoke from one of those dreams where you can't move. The dream was correct. Sometime not long before, I had surely been blue lighted. Jock was gone. I never saw either of them again. Somehow I missed them, Jock at least. It was a relief not to have to watch all the time. It was luxurious to bathe, but it gets mighty boring pacing your cage alone. I have no illusions about them. There must be well over 3 billion people I would rather be locked up with. But they were people. Tim didn't have anything else to recommend him. He was as coldly vicious as a guillotine. But Jock had some slight awareness of right and wrong, or he wouldn't have tried to justify himself. You might say he was just weak. But I don't hold with the idea that to understand all is to forgive all. You follow that, and the first thing you know, you're sentimental over murderers and rapists and kidnappers and forgetting their victims. That's wrong. I'll weep for the likes of Peewee, not over criminals whose victims they are. I missed Jock's talk, but if there were some way to drown such creatures at birth, I'd take my turn as executioner. That goes double for Tim. If they ended up as soup for hobgoblins, I couldn't honestly be sorry, even though it might be my turn tomorrow. As soup, they might have had their finest hour. Chapter 8. I was jarred out of such useless brain cudgeling by an explosion, a sharp crack, a bass rumble, then a whoosh of reduced pressure. I bounced to my feet. Anyone who has ever depended on a spacesuit is never again indifferent to a drop in pressure. I gasped, What the deuce? Then I added, Whoever is on watch had better get on the ball, or we'll all be breathing thin, cold stuff. No oxygen outside, I was sure, or rather, the astronomers were sure, and I didn't want to test it. Then I said, Somebody bombing us? I hope? Or was it an earthquake? This was not an idle remark. That Scientific American article concerning summer on Pluto had predicted sharp isostatic readjustments as the temperature rose, which is a polite way of saying, hold your hats, here come the chimneys. I was in an earthquake once in Santa Barbara. I didn't need a booster shot to remind me what every Californian knows and others learn in one lesson. When the ground does a jig, get outdoors. Only I couldn't. I spent 2 minutes checking whether adrenaline had given me the strength to jump 18 feet instead of 12. It hadn't. That was all I did for half an hour, if you don't count nail biting. Then I heard my name. Kip! Oh, Kip! Peewee! I screamed. Here, Peewee! Silence for an eternity of 3 heartbeats. Kip! Down here! Kip, are you down this hole? Yes! Can't you see me? I saw her head against the light above. I can now. Oh, Kip, I'm so glad. Then why are you crying? So am I. I'm not crying, she blubbered. Oh, Kip, Kip, can you get me out? Ah, she surveyed that drop. Stay where you are. Don't go away. She already had. She wasn't gone 2 minutes. It merely seemed like a week. Then she was back, and the darling had a nylon rope. Grab on, she shrilled. Wait a sec, how's it fastened? I'll pull you up. No, you won't, or we'll both be down here. Find somewhere to belay it. I can lift you. Belay it, hurry. She left again, leaving an end in my hands. Shortly, I heard very faintly, on belay. I shouted, testing, and took up the slack. I put my weight on it. It held. Climbing, I yelled, following the final G up the hole, and caught it. She flung herself on me, an arm around my neck, one around Madame Pompadour, and both of mine around her. She was even smaller and skinnier than I remembered. Oh, Kip, it's been just awful. I patted her bony shoulder blades. Yeah, I know. What do we do now? I started to say, where's Wormface, but she burst into tears. Kip, I think she's dead. My mind skidded. I was a bit stir crazy anyhow. Huh? Who? She looked as amazed as I was confused. Why, the mother thing. Oh, I felt a flood of sorrow. But, honey, are you sure? She was talking to me all right up to the last, and I didn't die. What in the world are you talking? Oh, I don't mean then, Kip. I mean now. Huh? She was here? Of course. Where else? No, that's a silly question. It's a big universe. I had decided long ago that the mother thing couldn't be here because Jock had brushed off the subject. I reasoned that Jock would either have said that she was here or have invented an elaborate lie for the pleasure of lying. Therefore, she wasn't on his list. Perhaps he had never seen her save as a bulge under my suit. I was so sure of my logic that it took a long moment to throw off prejudice and accept fact. Peewee, I said, gulping, I feel like I'd lost my own mother. Are you sure? Feel as if, she said almost automatically. I'm not sure, but she's outside, so she must be dead. Wait a minute. If she's outside, she's wearing a spacesuit, isn't she? No, no, she hasn't had one, not since they destroyed her ship. I was getting more confused. How did they bring her in here? They just sacked her and sealed her and carried her in. Kip, what do we do now? I knew several answers, all of them wrong. I had already considered them during my stretch in jail. Where's Wormface? Where are all the worm faces? Oh, all dead, I think. I hope you're right. I looked around for a weapon and never saw a hallway so bare. My toy dagger was only 18 feet away, but I didn't feel like going back down for it. What makes you think so? Peewee had reason to think so. The mother thing didn't look strong enough to tear paper, but what she lacked in beef, she made up in brains. She had done what I tried to do, reasoned out a way to take them all on. She had not been able to hurry because her plan had many factors, all of which had to mesh at once, and many of them she could not influence. She had to wait for the breaks. First, she needed a time when there were few worm faces around. The base was indeed a large supply dump and spaceport and transfer point, but it did not need a large staff. It had been unusually crowded the first moments I had seen it because our ship was in. Second, it also had to be when no ships were in because she couldn't cope with the ship. She couldn't get at it. Third, H hour had to be while the worm faces were feeding. They all ate together when they were few enough not to have to use their mess hall in relays, crowded around one big tub and sopping it up, I gathered, a scene out of Dante. That would place all her enemies on one target, except possibly one or two on engineering or communication watches. Wait a minute, I interrupted. You said they were all dead? Well, I don't know. I haven't seen any. Hold everything until I find something to fight with. But first things first, Peewee. Saying that I was going to find a weapon wasn't finding one. That corridor had nothing but more holes like the one I had been down, which was why Peewee had looked for me there. It was the one of the few places where she had not been allowed to wander at will. Jock had been correct on one point. Peewee and the mother thing had been star prisoners, allowed all privileges except freedom, whereas Jock and Tim and myself had been third class prisoners and or soup bones. It fitted the theory that Peewee and the mother thing were hostages rather than ordinary prisoners of war. I didn't explore those holes after I looked down one and saw a human skeleton. Maybe they got tired of tossing food to him. When I straightened up, Peewee said, "What are you shaking about?" "Nothing, come on." "I want to see. Peewee, every second counts and we've done nothing but yak. Come on, stay behind me." I kept her from seeing the skeleton, a major triumph over that little curiosity box, although it probably would not have affected her much. Peewee was sentimental only when it suited her. "Stay behind me" had the correct gallant sound, but it was not based on reason. I forgot that attack could come from the rear. I should have said, "Follow me and watch behind us." She did anyway. I heard a squeal and whirled around to see a worm face with one of those camera like things aimed at me. Even though Tim had used one on me, I didn't realize what it was. For a moment, I froze. But not Peewee. She launched herself through the air, attacking with both hands and both feet in the gallant audacity and utter recklessness of a kitten. That saved me. Her attack would not have hurt anything but another kitten, but it mixed him up so that he didn't finish what he was doing, namely paralyzing or killing me. He tripped over her and went down. And I stomped him. With my bare feet, I stomped him, landing on that lobster horror head with both feet. His head crunched. It felt awful. It was like jumping on a strawberry box. It splintered and crunched and went to pieces. I cringed at the feel, even though I was in an agony to fight, to kill. I trampled worms and hopped away feeling sick. I scooped up Peewee and pulled her back, as anxious to get clear as I had been to join battle seconds before. I hadn't killed it. For an awful moment, I thought I was going to have to wade back in. Then I saw that while it was alive, it did not seem aware of us. It flopped like a chicken freshly chopped, then quieted and began to move purposefully. But it couldn't see. I had smashed its eyes and maybe its ears, but certainly those terrible eyes. It felt around the floor carefully, then got to its feet, still undamaged except that its head was a crushed ruin. It stood still, braced tripod style by that third appendage, and felt the air. I pushed us further back. It began to walk, not toward us, or I would have screamed. It moved away, ricocheted off a wall, straightened out, and went back the way we had come. It reached one of those holes they used for prisoners, walked into it, and dropped. I sighed and realized I had been holding Peewee too tightly to breathe. I put her down. "There's your weapon," she said. "Huh?" "On the floor, just beyond where I dropped Madame Pompadour. The gadget." She went over, picked up her dolly, brushed away bits of ruined worm face, then took the camera like thing and handed it to me. "Be careful, don't point it toward you, or me." "Peewee," I said faintly, "don't you ever have an attack of nerves?" "Sure I do, when I have leisure for it, which isn't now. Do you know how to work it?" "No, do you?" "I think so. I've seen them, and the mother thing told me about them." She took it, handled it casually, but not pointing it at either of us. "Those holes on top, uncover one of them, it stuns. If you uncover them all, it kills. To make it work, you push here." She did, and a bright blue light shot out and splashed against the wall. "The light doesn't do anything," she added. "It's for aiming. I hope there wasn't anybody on the other side of that wall." No, I hope there was. But you know what I mean." It looked like a cockeyed 35 millimeter camera with a lead lens, one built from an oral description. I took it, being very cautious where I pointed it, and looked at it. Then I tried it, full power by mistake. The blue light was a shaft in the air, and the wall where it hit glowed and began to smoke. I shut it off. "You wasted power," Peewee chided. "You may need it later." "Well, I had to try it. Come on, let's go." Peewee glanced at her Mickey Mouse watch, and I felt irked that it had apparently stood up when my fancy one had not. "There's very little time, Kip. Can't we assume that only this one escaped?" "What? We certainly cannot. Until we're sure that all of them are dead, we can't do anything else. Come on." "But, well, I'll lead. I know my way around. You don't." "No." "Yes." So we did it her way. She led and carried the blue light projector while I covered the rear and wished for a third eye like a worm face. I couldn't argue that my reflexes were faster when they weren't, and she knew more than I did about our weapon, but it's graveling just the same. And we'll follow them poking around the alien base next time.